John Bell, thank you so much for joining me for this all-Atlantic conversation. First of all, introduce yourself to the viewers.
Well, hello, Joanne. My name is John Bell. I'm the director of what's called the Healthy Planet Directorate in the European Commission's Department for Research and Innovation. And our job is to get the knowledge and harness the knowledge with people across Europe to find the solutions to transitioning in a very sustainable way on all of these big challenges that we have, whether it's our climate or our oceans or our environment. So that's who I am. That's how I've come to work in this great space.
So I've been speaking to oceanographers and people who are mapping the ocean seafloor, ocean scientists, I guess, but you're the first kind of policymaker that I've had an opportunity to have a conversation with. And I think this is really important to remind people that the all-Atlantic concept and collaboration model was born out of policy, and those being the always statement and the blame statement. So let's talk about your role in bringing industry, academia, research together.
Most of industry, most of the economy. It's a very strange thing. It's a bit like how we look at the planet from space. We don't see the blue bit, we see the land masses. And so the oceans, one of the things I learned very early on in my work with Commissioner Gagan Quinn at the time, about the knowledge we were getting from the scientists, is we weren't drawing the right conclusions in terms of policy, that everything depends on our relationship with the ocean and on our understanding of the ocean. And so much of our world has been based on what we need from the ocean, and we realize that now it's a question of what the ocean needs from us. So in policy, if you look at the European Green Deal transition, which is this big policy shift of the European Union to be climate neutral over 30 years by 2050, to work with biodiversity and nature and food systems and work and in a fair way across all of these areas, we can't do it if the oceans are in the kind of trouble that they're in. It's a kind of a blind spot. People, think that the oceans are simply about marine scientists and oceanographers and people doing this incredible work. No, the oceans are front and center into whether we make this journey successfully or not. So for policymakers, bringing an understanding of this very complex and largely unknown silent majority of the planet, if you want to call it that, and to work out what it is that we know about it, what we need to know about it, what it needs from us, and how we can actually work with the ocean, became very clear to us when we were setting out the First Horizon program and talking with our partners in Canada and the United States. And very quickly, what you learn from the ocean science community, you see a different view of the world. Most of us live looking inwards on our landmass. We look into the Midlands or the adjoining cities, and actually we tend to see the oceans and the seas as something to be avoided or crossed, or a dark abyss or whatever, or some kind of a pastoral romantic vision. But in fact, it's the oceans that connect and define us as a civilization, as economies, and as societies. And what we realized is if we could harness the collective knowledge of scientists. Scientists are people who build bridges, not walls. They are people who look to work without frontiers. If we could bring, based on the understanding and the knowledge of the scientists, an understanding of the journey we needed to get on for those of us who are living around this ocean of ours, from pole to pole, from coast to coast, the Atlantic, and then you start looking outwards and connecting each other, we might just begin the process of understanding where we are on some of the most important changes that are actually underway, what it is that we don't know, where the opportunities are. I mean, we can go through this in a little bit more detail later on, but the ocean is not just for, fisheries. We used to talk about the ocean is not just fish and ships. We're talking about the next medicine cabinet. We're talking about the knowledge that will help us to understand how the weather is going to work in the future, where we should be building our cities, what we could be doing in terms of new ways to deal with carbon and climate and heating and cooling and all the rest. And who knows, we may even be living there in larger numbers in the future. It is the majority of the planet. So policymakers realized that for us to really deliver the policy changes, we needed to understand the oceans, and we're very far away from doing that. And to do that, you need the whole of the ocean. Well, there's one ocean on the earth, but let's talk about the Atlantic Ocean from pole to pole, coast to coast. And so we started by working with the scientists across between the United States, Canada, and the European Union. And then bit by bit, we're working in the polar research areas in both poles. and then this great development working with Brazil and South Africa, Argentina, Capo Verde, Morocco, and all the other. And the idea is to move from a number of research projects to create an ocean community, a research community of the people looking out on the ocean upon which so much depends, working together, sharing the research, going out and sharing the resources. It's a very difficult environment to work in, mapping it, observing it. We need to understand the DNA of the sea. We need to understand what its potential is. There's really very complex systems that will affect whether Ireland, where we both come from, Joanna, will look more like Iceland, or Portugal in a couple of 100 years' time. It's probably going to look like Ireland, which is not a bad thing. But also in terms of the risks, the changes in the ocean in terms of storms and extreme weather and sea level rise, and to give us a head start on what we need to do. You can't do that on your own. And the great thing about science is science is it's a universal language. It doesn't depend on what you think about anything. And the evidence will unite us. And I think we'll move from being a series of projects. We now have 1,000 research teams in the oceans since we started this process. We have a fit for purpose map of what observation of the ocean would need to know. We're starting to complete the map of the ocean. As you know, we know more about Mars than we do about the ocean floor. We're starting to work on the next generation of solutions from the sea, the DNA of the sea, the microbiome of the sea. We'll have new medicines, we'll have new forms of food. All of this requires a collective effort. And that's why we need to have an all-Atlantic ambition to build an all-Atlantic community so that our shared Atlantic and the shared knowledge will give us common solutions on this journey that we have ahead.
It's quite remarkable. If you asked all of those nations and continents to come together for any other reason, I'm not sure that they would. I mean, it's no mean feat to have this level of closeness and relationship because of science and the ocean. You make it sound so seamless, but I expect that there's a lot of hard work behind the scenes that brings something like All Atlantic 2021 together. But it's hugely important, and perhaps policymakers don't get the credit or the kudos that they deserve sometimes, right?
Well, they're not paid to get credit; they're paid to get things done. I think if you're doing your job properly, people don't notice. But I think, and this is great credit to our Portuguese hosts in the Azores, what you've seen has been the scientists have been able, we've been able with the scientists to explain what the mission is for the ocean, the need, to make the case politically. And we have had a sustained engagement from the European Union through the framework programme with successive commissioners, Maura Geoghegan Quinn, Carlos Moedas, Chenoet, Maria Gabriel, and colleagues, Sinkevicius and others. And we built a political relationship because when you have scientists working together, they all report in their own systems. They're accountable to their research or education ministers and so forth. And you create a community of practice at the different levels, the political level, policy level, scientific level. And scientists, they don't, as I said, they're bridge builders. Science diplomacy is actually a duplication of tautology. Scientists want to get the answers. They want to work together to get the answers. It's essentially inherently a collaborative effort, even if they're competing for the best answers. And what it's done over the years since we started off with Galway is you now have a community of practice. When I turn up in Washington or in Cape Town or Capo Verde or whatever it is, you have people who now understand what we're trying to do here at all levels. They're very excited about what it's generating. So, for example, one of the ideas we brought into this a couple of years ago was to bring the younger generation of researchers together around the community, really start building the community. And these are unbelievable people, young researchers from every corner of the Atlantic who are out there now talking to their communities about the oceans, about science, mobilizing, getting other young people to come in and get involved, young men and women from right across every imaginable situation they've come from. These are things you can do because now we know the direction, and you're building a community of practice, and the community will eventually be one that links not just science and research, but as you said at the beginning, the great universities, the cities. We should be able to see researchers moving around the oceans, doing their practice in different places. They have to use very expensive infrastructure very often, ship time and all the rest. we're working on that together. How could we make the best use? Could we have, imagine in 10 years' time, we had a University of the Sea where you could sign up and you could go in any part of the sea and work on that. You could do different courses where you could do polar work, or you could do deep sea work, or you could do technology work, or biotechnology work, or whatever you wanted to do. And I think this creates its own momentum, and it's a progressive momentum. And we're not looking at the divisive issues of resources and that kind of thing. These are collective needs. And what you'll see, Joanna, we work in sea basins. We've learned from this model, and now we're working in sea basins around the European Union. It's the same in the Black Sea. It's the same in the Mediterranean. It's the same in the Baltic. The people, they work. Science is an extraordinary bridge between people.
So this event that's coming up from the 2nd to the 4th of June, we've had similar events in Brussels and then hosted from South Africa. What is the big goal or the intention there, apart from bringing people together and having aligned conversations?
I think it's brilliantly fitting that it's taking place in the Azores. It's really brilliantly fitting because it really is the midway point in this great journey that we're making. And Ministers Manuel Heitor and Ricardo Serrao Santos have taken a fantastic lead, as indeed Portugal has in its presidency, in convening the community at a critical moment where we can see on both sides of the Atlantic the evidence that is going to be available before us this year in the IPCC and the work that will happen in the COP. Again, what we know about what's happening in the oceans and the importance of the oceans to all of these big picture will become clearer. It's a convening point after a very difficult phase for everybody going through the pandemic and all that has meant. And it is preparing a pathway. The declaration that is being prepared will prepare a pathway for us to meet on the other side of the Atlantic next year and start signing off on this is how we're going to go about doing this, and our commitment and the cooperation I have with my colleagues, Craig and Aaron and Terry and the others on the other side, or my colleagues in South Africa, Yona, and my colleagues in Jaira in Brazil. It's a very important, also it's a recognition, the Portuguese presidency of the European Union hosting this instead of something else in the center of our ocean, and actually in the middle of this political journey where we need to go to get the next level of ambition and committed signed off. It's a wonderful event. It's a pity we can't all be there. I have actually been to the Azores before. It's a remarkable place. It's the only place that has a tea plantation in the European Union, by the way. Remarkable people, remarkable place. And it's also the people, it symbolizes again the people who understand that everything depends on the ocean. Where better could you go than right in the center of our common ocean? So I think it's a very fitting place and a very fitting time. And we really appreciate the leadership that Portugal has shown in all of this.
And so what would you say to those watching this conversation and who perhaps haven't registered for the main event or even indeed for some of the side events? They really should take a couple of days out of their office, and maybe that might transform their thinking or even relationships then going forward.
Yeah, I think, Joanna, one of the things about this is we all feel so bloody helpless when we're looking at the Attenborough documentaries or the sea conspiracy stuff on Netflix, or we're thinking this is too big and too far away. It's not. I mean, sign up, spend some time, engage. You'll feel a lot better when you listen to the fact that there's some really impressive people out there, and they're working on this. I won't say that we've got it yet with the ocean, because you want to be a pretty brave person to do that. But if you look at the phrase I usually end up making presentations on when I talk about what science and research cooperation brings to this, we are running out of time, but we're not running out of ideas. And if you engage in this process, you want to do something useful and uplifting and informative and contribute, go and have a look at one of these workshops, sign up. These are some of the world's finest people who are out of the water for a couple of days to engage as they always do. Wonderful people, and I won't even go into their CVs and stuff. They're incredible people you'd queue up to hear lecturing at the world's top universities when they're not in their wetsuits. So take the opportunity. This is doing something for the ocean, engaging. understanding what's going on, seeing where you could fit in, maybe something you could do, something you could follow, some piece of information you can take to your local community or authority, or where you live, or your school, or your college, or whatever. There's a huge array of things that are going on. So, I mean, the great thing about this is it removes the powerlessness. Knowledge is a great empowerment for people. I mean, this is how progress has been made, and this is how evolution, in the end, it may even happen for men, that we evolve into a more aware and knowledgeable, effective, and sustainable society. But here's a chance to do something hands-on instead of going, pity the poor whales, or what are we going to do about the oceans and the plastic? They're here. Engage and take what you can out of it, and feedback. Get involved. Feedback. Tell them what you're interested in, what you need, or questions that you have, or how you contribute, or where you can go. Maybe you're thinking about studying science. Maybe you just have an interest in watching stuff on Netflix or TV, and you want to see, has anybody got there? Where are we on this critical question of our time? An amazing opportunity for people. Anyway, I'm quite positive about this. Not all aspects of my work are as inspiring as the people who work out there in the ocean and about the ocean, for the ocean. So, go and be inspired for a bit.
And I can actually back you up in terms of how engaging the ocean science community are, because I'm looking at the metrics behind the scene and watching those digital conversations. And it really is remarkable to see how much information and the level of transparency of the information that is being shared. You might not see it across other sectors. And I, for one, again, looking at the digital element of this, can definitely say that you're totally right, because this is an engaged community who is looking to share as much as they can.
Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely right.
So, John Bell, thank you so much for joining us and having this All Atlantic conversation, and wishing you all the very best with the All Atlantic 2021 Connecting, Acting, Cooperating Research and Innovation Conference in June.
That's great. And I look forward to, those were the 3 words that our Commissioner Gabrielle gave us when she met with the whole community in February 2020, just before this awful stuff started. And the progress that's been made is impressive. We must never let ourselves be downhearted. Look at the ocean itself. If you can't be inspired by that, but I'm a bit jealous, Joanna. You can probably see the ocean from where you are. It's a little bit further from where I am, but I'm looking forward to seeing all of our Atlantic Coast citizens online and engage at the Azores. Look after yourselves. Thank you.
Thanks, John.